Hello there. How are you today? I was just helping Marvin get to his dinner tonight. He actually really enjoys eating dinner like a human sometimes, sitting up at the table and using a spoon. And obviously he doesn't quite have the dexterity of humans with his finger strength, so I like to spoon feed him, and he really enjoys putting on a nice sweater and having dinner at the table. So anyway, I'm just going to take this sweatshirt off for now, and we'll get to our reading. Marvin's probably a little upset at me that I'm taking the sweatshirt off because he does truly enjoy it. And I'll set that over there so that he can get down and enjoy the rest of his little dinner. I'll set the spoon off to the side, and now I'll open up to where we left off yesterday. I do believe yesterday we read chapter 26 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, so today we're going to read chapter 27, and chapter 27 is called... What'd you say? My producer's talking to me. Hold on.
You forgot to say it's Hamilton Reads.
Oh yeah, this is Hamilton Reads.
And I'm Mr. Hamilton.
And I'm Mr. Hamilton. And that was Marvin, and he was eating dinner. And now it's time to read. Chapter 27. Mike TV is sent by television. Mike TV was even more excited than Grandpa Joe at seeing a bar of chocolate being sent by television. "But Mr. Wonka," he shouted, "can you send other things through the air in the same way? Breakfast cereal, for instance?" "Oh, my sainted aunts," cried Mr. Wonka, "don't mention that disgusting stuff in front of me. Do you know what breakfast cereal is made of? It's made of all those little crusty wooden shavings you find in pencil sharpeners." "Well, but could you send it by television if you wanted to, as you do chocolate?" asked Mike TV. "Well, of course I could." "And what about people?" asked Mike TV. "Could you send a real live person from one place to another in the same way?" "Well, person," cried Mr. Wonka. "Are you off your rocker?" "But could it be done?" "Well, good heavens, child, I really don't know. I suppose it could, yes. I'm pretty sure it could. Of course it could. I wouldn't like to risk it, though. It might have some very nasty results." But Mike TV was already off and running. The moment he heard Mr. Wonka saying, "I'm pretty sure it could," of course it could, he turned away and started running as fast as he could towards the other end of the room where the great camera was standing. "Look at me," he shouted as he ran. "I'm going to be the first person in the world to be sent by television." "No, no, no, no," cried Mr. Wonka. "Mike," screamed Mrs. TV, "stop, come back. You'll be turned into a million tiny pieces." But there was no stopping Mike TV now. The crazy boy rushed on, and when he reached the enormous camera, he jumped straight for the switch, scattering Oompa Loompas right and left as they went. "See you later, alligator," he shouted, and he pulled down the switch, and as he did so, he leapt out into the full glare of the mighty lens. There was a blinding flash. Then there was silence. Then Mrs. TV ran forward, but she stopped dead in the middle of the room, and she stood there. She stood staring at the place where her son had been, and her great red mouth opened wide, and she screamed, "He's gone! He's gone!" "Oh, great heavens, he has gone!" shouted Mr. TV. Mr. Wonka hurried forward and placed a hand gently on Mrs. TV's shoulder. "We shall have to hope for the best," he said. "We must pray that your little boy will come out unharmed at the other end." "Mike!" screamed Mrs. TV, clasping her head in her hands. "Where are you?" "Well, I'll tell you where he is," said Mr. TV. "He's whizzing around above our heads in a million tiny pieces." "Oh, don't talk about it," wailed Mrs. TV. "We must watch the television set," said Mr. Wonka. "He may come through any moment." Mr. and Mrs. TV and Grandpa Joe and little Charlie and Mr. Wonka all gathered around the television and stared tensely at the screen. The screen was blank. Here's a picture of the TV parents and Mr. Wonka in the TV room. "He's taking a heck of a long time to come across," said Mr. TV, wiping his brow. Oh dear, said Mr. Wonka. "I do hope that no parts of him gets left behind." What on earth do you mean? Asked Mr. TV sharply. Well, I don't wish to alarm you, said Mr. Wonka, but it does sometimes happen that only about half the little pieces find their way into the television set. It happened last week. I don't know why, but the result was that only half a bar of chocolate came through. Mrs. TV let out a scream of horror. You mean only a half of Mike is coming back to us? She cried. Well, let's hope it's the top half, said Mr. TV. Hold everything, said Mr. Wonka. Watch the screen. Something's happening. The screen had suddenly begun to flicker. Then some wavy lines appeared. Mr. Wonka adjusted one of the knobs, and the wavy lines went away. And now, very slowly, the screen began to get brighter and brighter. Here he comes, yelled Mr. Wonka. Yes, that's him, all right. Was he all in one piece? Mrs. TV asked. Well, I'm not sure, said Mr. Wonka. It's too early to tell. Faintly at first, but becoming clearer and clearer every second, the picture of Mike TV appeared on the screen. He was standing up and waving at the audience and grinning from ear to ear. But he's a midget, shouted Mr. TV. Mike, cried Mrs. TV, are you all right? Are there any bits of you missing? Isn't he going to get any bigger? Shouted Mr. TV. Talk to me, Mike, cried Mrs. TV. Say something. Tell me you're all right. A tiny little voice, no louder than the squeaking of a mouse, came out of the television set. Hi, Mom, it said. Hi, Pop. Look at me. I'm the first person ever to be sent by television. Oh, grab him, ordered Mr. Wonka. Quick! Mrs. TV shot out a hand and picked the tiny figure of Mike TV out of the screen. Hooray, cried Mr. Wonka. He's all in one piece. He's completely unharmed. You call that unharmed? Snapped Mrs. TV, running to and fro across the palm of her hand, waving his pistols in the air. He is certainly not more than an inch tall. Well, he's shrunk, said Mr. TV. Of course he's shrunk, said Mr. Wonka. What did you expect? Well, this is terrible, wailed Mrs. TV. What are we going to do? And Mr. TV said, we can't send him back to school like this. He'll get trotted on. He'll get squashed. Well, he won't be able to do anything, cried Mrs. TV. Oh, yes, I will, squeaked the tiny voice of Mike TV. I'll still be able to watch television. Well, never again, shouted Mr. TV. I'm throwing the television set right out the window the moment we get home. I've had enough of television. When he heard this, Mike TV flew into a terrible tantrum. He started jumping up and down on the palm of his mother's hand, screaming and yelling and trying to bite her fingers. I want to watch television, he squeaked. I want to watch television. I want to watch television. Here's a picture of Mrs. TV holding her son, Mike TV, in the palm of her hand. He's super, super, super tiny. Here, give him to me, said Mr. TV, and he took the tiny boy and shoved him into the breast pocket of his jacket and stuffed a handkerchief on top. Squeals and yells came from inside the pocket, and the pocket shook as the furious little prisoner fought to get out. Oh, Mr. Wonka, wailed Mrs. TV, how can we make him grow? Well, said Mr. Wonka, stroking his beard and gazing thoughtfully at the ceiling, I must say that's a wee bit tricky. But small boys are extremely springy and elastic. They stretch like mad, so what we'll do, we'll put them in a special machine. Hey, did you have to push the spoon off the table? Are you protesting? Yeah, you can't even look at me, can you? They stretch like mad. So what we'll do, we'll put them in a special machine I have for testing the stretchiness of chewing gum. Maybe that will bring him back to what he was. Oh, thank you, said Mrs. TV. Don't mention it, dear lady. How far do you think he'll stretch? Asked Mr. TV. Well, maybe miles, said Mr. Wonka. Who knows? But he's going to be awfully thin. Everything gets thinner when you stretch it. You mean like chewing gum? Asked Mr. TV. Exactly. Well, how thin will it be? Asked Mrs. TV anxiously. Well, I haven't the foggiest idea, said Mr. Wonka, and it doesn't really matter anyway, because we'll soon fatten him up again. All we'll have to do is give him a triple overdose of my wonderful super vitamin chocolate. Super vitamin chocolate contains huge amounts of vitamin A and vitamin B. It also contains vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin F, vitamin G, vitamin I, vitamin J, vitamin K, vitamin L, vitamin M, vitamin N, vitamin O, vitamin P, vitamin Q, vitamin R, vitamin T, vitamin U, vitamin V, vitamin W, vitamin X, vitamin Y, and believe it or not vitamin Z. The only two vitamins it doesn't have in it are vitamin S, because it makes you sick, and vitamin H, because it makes you grow horns on the top of your head like a bull. But it does have in it a very small amount of the rarest and most magical vitamin of them all, vitamin Wonka. Well, and what will that do to him? Said Mr. TV anxiously. Well, it'll make his toes grow out until they're as long as his fingers. Oh no, cried Mrs. TV. Don't be silly, said Mr. Wonka. It's most useful. He'll be able to play the piano with his feet. But Mr. Wonka... No arguments, please, said Mr. Wonka. He turned away and clicked his fingers 3 times in the air. An Oompa Loompa appeared immediately and stood beside him. Follow these orders, said Mr. Wonka, handing the Oompa Loompa a piece of paper on which he had written full instructions, and you'll find the boy in his father's pocket. Off you go. Goodbye, Mr. TV. Goodbye, Mrs. TV. And please don't look so worried. They all come out in the wash. You know, every one of them. At the end of the room, the Oompa Loompas around the giant camera were already beating their tiny drums and beginning to jog up and down to the rhythm. Oh, here they go again, said Mr. Wonka. I'm afraid you can't stop them singing. Little Charlie caught Grandpa Joe's hand, and the two of them stood beside Mr. Wonka in the middle of the long, bright room, listening to the Oompa Loompas. And this is what they sang. Here's a picture of all the Oompa Loompas. The most important thing we've learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Oh, better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. In almost every house we've been, we've watched them gaping at the screen. They'll loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week, in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. They sit and stare and sit until they're hypnotized by it, until they're absolutely drunk with all that shockingly ghastly junk. Oh, yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the windowsill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved tot? It rots the senses in the head. It kills imagination dead. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind he can no longer understand a fantasy of fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. All right, you'll cry. All right, you'll say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our children, darling? Please explain. We'll answer this by asking you what use the darlings ones to do. How use they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented? Have you forgotten, do you know? We'll say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They read. They read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott gazooks, one half their lives was reading books. Books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bathroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens, and whales, and treasure isles and distant shores where smugglers rode with muffled oars, and pirates wearing purple pants and sailing ships and elephants, and cannibals crouching round the pot, stirring away at something hot. It smells so good, what can it be? Good gracious, it's Penelope! The younger ones had Beatrice Potter with Mr. Todd, the dirty rotter, and Squirrel Nutkin, Pigland Bland, and Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, and just how the camel got his hump, and how the monkey lost his rump, and Mr. Toad, and bless my soul, there's Mr. Rat and Mr. Mole. Oh, books, what books they used to know, those children living long ago. So please, oh please, we beg, we pray, go throw your TV set away, and in its place you can install a lovely bookshelf on the wall. Then fill the shelves with lots of books, ignoring all the dirty looks, the screams and yells, the bites and kicks, and children hitting you with sticks. Fear not, because we promise you that in about a week or two of having nothing else to do, they'll now begin to feel the need of having something good to read. And once they start, oh boy, you watch the slowly growing joy that fills their hearts. They'll grow so keen. They'll wonder what they'd ever seen in that ridiculous machine, that nauseating, foul, unclean, repulsive television screen. And later each and every kid will love you more for what you did. P.S. Regarding Mike TV, we very much regret that we shall simply have to wait and see if we can get him back his height. But if we can't, it serves him right. That's the end of the chapter. That was a tongue twister, that song, poem, whatever by the Oompa Loompas. I don't sing it quite like they probably sing it, I'm sure, but it's exhausting. That was a really long one. And I would like to point out before I get into my sock segment and my shout-outs today that I thought it was pretty cool that Roald Dahl, the author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, put in there kind of a little dig on televisions, on TV. I do honestly believe that a lot of young people, even adults these days, are watching too much television. I think there's a time and a place to watch television, but I think we should really seek to try to get outside, enjoy the outdoors, enjoy sports, find other hobbies. Even if it's not sports or games or getting outdoors, there's plenty of other hobbies. And as Roald Dahl pointed out with the Oompa Loompas song, reading is a great hobby, and it's something that really helps your mind and helps you your vocabulary, and it's just a really good source of storytelling. So I advise all of you at home who are watching this to get out and read more, but also get away from your television sets and try to be a little bit more active in addition to reading. So now we'll move on to our socks segment before I get to some shout outs. So for my socks segment today, I have on some very special, lovely socks that I will show you here. I have on some pretty heart socks today. So I got some pink hearts, some white hearts, some red hearts, some silver hearts, lots of hearts. Anyway, I'll put my socks away, and now we'll get to our shout-outs. So, number one, I would like to shout out my favorite golf course, a golf course that is currently closed, but they're allowing people to play, and if they want to drop a donation, they may, as long as you're playing and socially distancing, which is super important that you're maintaining socially distance, even when you're meeting somebody out to go hiking or, as I do, golf sometimes. Remain 6 feet apart and do it safely. But shout out to Bridgewater Golf Club. I really appreciate them allowing me to play golf here and there and stay obviously safe with socially distanced golfing experiences. I would also like to shout out to Uber Eats and DoorDash. Those are two different kind of avenues to order food from some places that maybe don't usually offer delivery, which is something that me and my girlfriend and Isabella have been using a lot to order some of our favorite restaurants at home and continue to support some of the small businesses that are remaining open, because supporting small businesses is always very important. My last shout out today is shout out to any of the students and staff that were on our Google Meet video conference call this morning or this afternoon at 1 o'clock. I really enjoyed seeing everybody. It made me really happy. It made my day, especially seeing some students that I haven't gotten the chance to talk to or speak to since school let out over a month ago. I think over a month ago now. It's hard. I lose track of time. So anyway, thank you for stopping by for another episode of Hamilton Reads. Today's Friday, April 24th. So we'll pick up on Monday, which will be April 27th, I believe. And we'll read chapter 28 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Thanks for stopping by.